Welcome to our continuing series, Questions and Answers for a World in Crisis, Miracles, Part 2, from the Mother. You can begin to understand him only when you feel it that way, that he plays all possible games, and possible not according to human conception, but according to his own conception. Then there is no room for the miracle, except for a pretend miracle. Silence. If what belongs to the supramental world materialized abruptly, rather than through a slow evolution, that would be something which man, as a mental being, even if his mentality, his mental domain, were brought to perfection, could call a miracle. For it is the intervention in his conscious life of something he doesn't consciously carry within him. The taste for miracles, which is very strong, much stronger in children or in hearts that have remained childlike than in highly mentalized beings, is basically the faith that the aspiration for the marvelous will come true, that things beyond all that we may expect of normal life will come true. This is a temptation that every teacher meets at every step, for the very simple reason that ordinary humanity, in a general way, not being in personal contact with the divine powers, understands nothing of what an illumined consciousness may be, and asks for material proofs. It is on this demand that most religions are established, and for reasons which I may very frankly call political, they have put at the origin of their religion a more or less considerable number of miracles as having been performed by the founders. And they have thus more or less crudely encouraged among ignorant people the taste, the necessity for seeing what they call miracles in order to believe in the divine power of a person. This is an extraordinary ignorance, because it is not at all necessary to have a divine power or consciousness to perform miracles. It is infinitely more easy to perform miracles with the help of small entities of the vital world, who are material enough to be in touch with the physical world and act upon it, than to live in the consciousness of the higher regions and to work upon nature only through the intermediary of all the other domains. It has been repeated over and over again to all human intellects that the proof of a being's divinity is that he can raise the dead, cure maladies, and do many other things of the same kind, except making a fool wise. Mother added later, this is a Mohammedan story, I believe. As it was said that Jesus raised the dead, healed the sick, made the dumb speak, gave guaranteed that this is not a proof. It proves only one thing, that these masters are in contact with the powers of the vital world, and that with the help of those beings, they can perform these miracles. That's all. If one relies upon that to recognize the superiority of a man, one would make a glaring mistake. Only I would like you to know my conclusion. I have already spoken about it several times, more or less in detail. It is this: each one of these numberless regions has its own very logical determinism. Everything proceeds from cause to effect. But these worlds, although differentiated, are not separate from each other, and by numerous processes which we may study, the inner or higher worlds are in constant contact with the lower or external worlds and act upon these, so that the determinism of one changes the determinism of the other. If you take the purely material domain, for instance, and if you notice that the material laws, the purely material laws, are altered by something all of a sudden, you ought to say that it was a miracle, because there is a rupture of the determinism of one plane through the intervention of another. But usually we do not call this a miracle. For example, when the human will intervenes and changes something, that seems to you quite natural, because you have been accustomed to it from your childhood. You remember, don't you, the example I gave you the other day? A stone falls according to the law of its own determinism. But if you wish to interrupt its fall, and you stretch out your hand and catch it, well, you ought to call this a miracle. But you don't, because you are used to it. But a rat or a dog would perhaps call it a miracle if they could speak. And note that it is the same for what people call a miracle. They speak of a miracle because they are absolutely ignorant, unaware of the gradations between the will which wants to express itself and the plane on which it expresses itself. When they have a mental or a vital will, the thing seems quite natural to them. But when it is a question of the will of a higher world, the world of the gods, or of a higher entity, which all of a sudden upsets all your little organization, that seems to you a miracle. But it is a miracle simply because you are unable to follow the gradations by which the phenomenon took place. Therefore, the supreme will, that which comes from the very highest region, if you saw it in its logical action, if you were aware of it continually, it would seem to you altogether natural. You can express this in two ways. Either say, it is quite natural, it is like this that things must happen, it is only an expression of the divine will, or each time you see on the material plane an intervention coming from another plane, you ought to say, it is miraculous. So I may say with certainty that people who want to see miracles are people who cherish their ignorance. You understand my logic, don't you? These people love their ignorance, and they insist upon seeing miracles and being astounded. And that is why people who have done yoga seriously consider it altogether fatal to encourage this tendency. Hence, it is forbidden. If you use power to show that you possess it, it becomes so full of falsehood and untruth that finally it disappears. But it is not always thus. Because, as I said at the beginning, when it concerns a power like the power of healing or the power of changing an altogether external thing, of making an unfavorable circumstances favorable, of finding lost objects, all these countless little miracles which are found in all religions, it is much more easy and even more effective to do these miracles with the help of the entities of the vital world, which are not always recommendable. Far from it. And then these beings make fun of you. This begins very well, very brilliantly, and usually finishes very badly. What triggered the whole experience? I forgot to tell you this. When I asked the Lord, why? Why couldn't I do something for these people who are really nice? Is that the story of the past? Came back when Sri Aurobindo told me, you are doing a work of the overmind. You will work miracles that will fill the world with admiration, and so on. I told you the story. It came back massively, exactly the same thing. That is not the truth we want. And that's also why I stopped all those pujas of the Mother in October, November. Because they all used to come with the idea of getting something. Miracles, miracles, miracles. Never for the true thing. And that's what they expect of God, of course. Miracles or favors. Illogical and unreasonable things. Instead of wanting the divine's progressive advance. From Sri Aurobindo. The mistake is to think that it, Sri Aurobindo's force, must be either a miraculous force or else none. There is no miraculous force, and I do not deal in miracles. Speaking semi-seriously, I am not here to do miracles, to order, but to try to get in a new consciousness somewhere in the world, which is itself, however, to attempt a miracle. If physical miracles happen to tumble in the process, well and good. But you can't present your medical pistol in my face and call on me to stand and deliver. As for the force, application of my force, short of the supramental, means always a struggle of forces, and the success depends, 1, on the strength and persistency of the force put out, 2, the receptivity of the subject, 3, the sanction of the unmentionable. I beg your pardon. I meant the unnameable, ineffable, unknowable. The supernatural is that the nature of which we have not attained, or do not yet know, or the means of which we have not yet conquered. The common taste for miracles is the sign that man's ascent is not yet finished. Great saints have performed miracles, greater saints have railed at them. The greatest have both railed at them and performed them. As in the world, so in ourselves. We cannot see God because of his workings, and especially because he works in us through our nature, and not by a succession of arbitrary miracles. Man demands miracles that he may have faith. He wishes to be dazzled in order that he may see. And this impatience, this ignorance, may turn into a great danger and disaster if, in our revolt against the divine leading, we call in another distorting force, more satisfying to our impulses and desires, and ask it to guide us and give it the divine name. A complete liberation and a complete perfection, or the complete possession of the divine and possession by the divine, is possible. But it does not usually happen by an easy miracle or a series of miracles. The miracle can and does happen, but only when there is the full call and complete self-giving of the soul and the entire widest opening of the nature. In this yoga, one can't take a shortcut in everything. I had to work on each problem and on each conscious plane to solve or to transform. And in each, I had to take the blessed conditions as they were and do honest work without resorting to miracles.